You got the distribution call, you got the placement, you did everything right. And somewhere between the purchase order and the shelf, something went sideways. Your product isn't there, or it's there, but it's wrong. I'm Jordan Karcher, founder and CEO of Eileen. Know Thy Shelf is the show for founders and CPG superstars who are done taking anyone's word for what's happening at the shelf. Real stories, real data, one question underneath all of it. Your product is listed as in stock. Is it though? Courtney Clark built her career inside Courtney Clark built her career inside some of the fastest moving beverage brands in the country. And now she's employee number one at Brewt, a premium cocktail mixer brand that just landed in thousands of Walmart and Kroger doors across the US. And what she's learning in real time is getting into those stores and knowing what's actually happening on the shelf are two completely different things. Courtney, welcome. Let's start before Brewt, because I think your path into the industry is actually a big part of why you see things the way you do. You came up through Airbnb before you ever touched beverage. What did that experience give you, and what didn't the industry prepare you for when you came into the beverage world?
Yeah. Hi, Jordan. Thanks for having me. It was a really interesting path into the beverage world, CPG. Actually, right before Airbnb, I interned at Nike World headquarters. That's what brought me out west. And that was like my first look into like a giant corporate machine with all these moving parts, everyone like in their division doing their thing. And then that led me to through some connections to Airbnb, and I worked out of their Portland office. So, kind of like a satellite office from their San Francisco headquarters. And I just couldn't believe the technology. I mean, at the core of Airbnb, like it is a tech company, it's also hospitality, but I couldn't believe just the pace of working somewhere where you want to see something come through on the platform, like a button, or even just like the user experience of the platform. This is ugly. I want this to be more fun, even for us internally to use as employees. And they would reach out to their engineering team and make it happen. So I was only there for a few months, but what I immediately realized when I got into the beverage industry, I was actually laid off from Airbnb during COVID. When I got to beverage, the very first thing I realized is we were constantly working in Excel sheets and PowerPoint. Like I felt like I went back 20 years when I stepped into the beverage industry.
And I think that's a really good place to start because obviously very different industries, very different technology capabilities, insights. And you started at White Club, which was really a fast growing, obviously a hugely popular brand. What was that adjustment like? You weren't necessarily starting at just a small little startup, but a fast growing brand. How did you have transitioned into that role, never having experienced the beverage world before?
Yeah, so it was a really great first position in the beverage industry. I was a field sales rep at Mike's Hard Lemonade, Mark Anthony Brands, White Claw, whatever you want to call it. And aside from just feeling like the technology was lagging, and I realized once I left White Claw, like that was just like an industry wide experience. But as far as training goes, I mean, Mark Anthony Brands was like one of the top probably suppliers in the country for training. So they'd send you to Chicago, how to present with confidence, how to use Excel. Like it was almost like University 101 in CPG. So it was a really, really great place to start. And I think it gave me the foundational tools to get to where I am now of like actually helping build beverage companies because that's definitely not intuitive when stepping into the CPG industry.
And so you really found a great home to start with based off of the training and understanding. Obviously, it sounds like it's carried you really far forward. Did you plan on building a career in beverage at that time, or was this just a, hey, I need a job and it just happened to be a great job?
Yeah, no, to be honest, like I was embarrassed. All of my friends, I had 250 interns that became friends through Nike. They were all working like at the most amazing jobs, amazing agencies, like anywhere from like the NBA to Spotify to like really cool companies. And coming out of college, I think a lot of people just like want to work where the name on the door is really cool. And there's definitely benefits to that. And I had a rough just like go, I think kind of coming out of college around the time of COVID. My first job ever actually was at a marketing agency that fully serviced Nike. And on my very first day there, I took a contract position. That was what brought me out to Portland full time after my internship. So like I grew up in Florida. I remember I went home for about a week after I graduated school at the University of Kentucky and moved out west on this contract job. And my very first day on the job, they told me like, we're already letting you know, obviously nothing personal, but Nike, they were launching their Joyride shoe, is no longer using us. So you need to start looking for a new job immediately. So that lasted 3 months and then like went into Airbnb, got laid off because of COVID. So that was 2 layoffs in less than a year out of college. And I'm just questioning everything about myself. Like, what am I doing with my life? So when I found Mike's, it was definitely like the name on the door, they always would say was Mike's Hard Lemonade. And to be honest, like that was a 20-year-old brand at the time. It was no longer cool. It was maybe like what my older sister drank in college, like not really, I didn't think it was cool. So it was like definitely putting my ego aside. But once I realized what the beverage industry had to offer, and I realized it really quickly when I was getting to go to like Blazers games on the company dime, like all of the things that I think actually my friends at Nike thought they were going to do with their careers in the sports industry, like I was able to do through beverage. And it was just so fun as like a career right out of college.
Funny, and it's funny, I remember my dad always told me when I was younger, he was in the beverage world too. He said, "If you can't be a rock star, work in the liquor industry." And it's true. Sponsors and everything, it is the craziest thing. You never expect it, but you go, "Oh, I guess I can go to every event." And
Yep,
there's always a liquor brand involved. So that's probably more true than working at Nike when you see all of your shoes, but you can never actually get to the game.
exactly.
So you start with White Claw. You helped to really build White Claw, I believe, to almost 1,000,000 plus cases in Idaho. So you really oversaw a lot of growth in emerging markets for the brand.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I will say White Claw was already on fire when I got there. I got there during COVID. And honestly, my first few months in the job was just explaining to retailers that we had no stock because of the huge increase and spike in sales, like right before I had gotten there. So it was already on its way. Like I can't take credit for that. But yeah, definitely. For the first like year and a half I was there, every sales meeting was up like 300, 400, 500%. And they kept trying to tell me, they're like, this is not normal for beverage brands, but that's all I knew. So, yeah, it was a really great time to be there. And also like COVID, so many people were moving to Idaho and that was my market and Boise was absolutely blowing up. So there was like new stores opening every day, new neighborhoods being built every day. So like the geographically itself, it was just blowing up.
That's great. I mean, it's fun to see that though, because it brings its own challenges. When you are growing that fast, it's very different than when you're just trying to eke out a few percentage points of growth. But that would be probably a pretty interesting experience of, seeing how quickly something can move and then all of the downstream effects of, selling fast is great, but if you're not ready, what does that mean to your inventory? How do you actually stay in stock? Can I get it in stock fast enough? The lot that comes to with it. But that also takes us into Brutes, where you are now, and startup. So now it's a new brand, very different than, let's say, the White Claw experience, I'm sure, building something from scratch. Tell me about it. What is Brutes? How does it work? What are some key?
Yeah, so Brut's is a premium cocktail mixer company at its core. Our founder and co-founder, Luke and Emily, they started the company about 10 years ago. Very scrappy, like started really just selling the cocktails or not selling, giving the cocktails to their friends at pool parties around LA. And then everyone was like, these are so good. You should start bottling this up. And a really interesting fact on our co-founder Emily, she was a Muay Thai fighter, professional fighting career for about like 8 years, lived in Thailand, like all over the world fighting. So her body was kind of like given up on her towards the end of that. And she's like, what am I going to do next? And like, who doesn't love drinking? And during COVID, it was just a lot of margaritas. And finally it was like, okay, like this is what she's going to do. So they went all in, like they built their own facility in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They bottled all of their own stuff. They kind of created this like farmers market ring around Michigan where they had like 18 farmers markets a weekend that they hired people out and like had amazing trial. And it was like a very grassroots, like bootstrap effort. And then one thing led to the next and like a lot of amazing connections actually from the farmers market that like long story short got them into Walmart and got their foot in the door there and to where we are most recently in 1,000 Walmarts. I think it's like what 45 states now. We just got expansion and we're in now 12 Kroger regions. We just added 4 more out west, like literally this week. So it's just like absolutely blown up from like from their humble beginnings.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you joined, I mean, obviously you were joining as, let's call it, employee number one. What was the appeal to you to jump into a kind of a very new brand? I mean, there's, as you probably know, not a lot of security in a brand new brand. What was that? Like, what made you want to take on this role?
Yeah, well, I was coming straight from Spindrift where When I was at Mike's, I never saw like the equity and acquisition side of beverage before. Mark Anthony Brands was always independently owned by Anthony Von Mandel. They were never going to sell, and that was very clear. So that never really crossed my mind of like this more like I don't know I don't know how to describe it, but this more like lucrative side of like being in beverage and building brands. So when I was at Spindrift coming into it, I was just like really excited to build their Spindrift Spiked division, which is like why I was recruited over there from White Claw. And then over the first few months, like they were like, yeah, you're gonna like part of your salary package is like equity, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I was like, all right, cool. Didn't think much of it. And then as I started just like meeting people around the company, one person in particular who I became very close was employee number 1 at Spindrift. And she was just like such an inspiring person. And hearing her journey with Spindrift over 12 years and how close she was to the founder, Bill, and like how they started basically selling up and down the streets to what it was when they got acquired last year. And being part of that, not only like the money side, but also just like the fulfillment of being able to like really see all of your efforts culminate into this amazing like sale. So I knew from there I wanted to maybe not be employee number 1, but one of the first employees to like really be hands-on and like scaling a business. And so I just found a listing on LinkedIn that Emily posted, and it was really like casual, and I really liked that. And she just said it was a post to like Workable or something for VP of sales. And her caption, all it said was, turns out I can't do this all alone, hiring my first sales employee. So I clicked apply and just hit it off with her and her co-founder Luke immediately. And it kind of had like it checked all the boxes. They were building a DSD network, which I was very familiar with. It was non-alc at the time. We're launching an RTD, and I have both of that non-alc and alc experience from Spindrift. So it just kind of like checked all my boxes, and I was really excited about it.
That's awesome. And so really it was that transition from employee to having ownership. I mean, I think
Ye-
that's
Yeah,
the yeah, and when you're building a CPG brand, I think you need that commitment.
yeah,
You easy to bounce and you see a lot of it bouncing between brands, moving up your career, but when you're committed and it works, it's financially rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun because it
yeah.
is building building somebody from scratch. This thing starts at farmers markets to thousands of stores. And so speaking of the sales piece, I'd love to hear what your approach is because you did inherit a sales plan. You kind of came in and I'm sure it was on you to say, "Hey, what do we do now?" Tell me like how you built out what the sales strategy is, like, and probably still are. What is the kind of go-to-market plan, and how are you leveraging your previous experience to help build the future of Brutes?
Yeah, it's really a unique situation because even though this was a farmers market brand for so many years and like really kind of focused on Michigan, by the time I was hired last fall, they were already in 600 Walmarts. They were already in 6 Kroger regions. They were in Mass, Connecticut, New Jersey, which are primarily independent driven states. So and we didn't have any sales team. We didn't even have VIP data, so I couldn't see where our cases were being sent. I couldn't see the price as what they were being sent. Like, there was very little visibility into anything. All I could see was our Circana data, which thankfully, they already did pay for that. A lot of small brands don't have that ability. So I was able to see that, and I was able to see our points of distribution and our dollar sales and unit sales. And I was like, something is up here. Like, how do we have so much distribution and things just really aren't turning? And I will say, like, it was definitely a learning curve for me to work with bottles for the first time. Like, glass bottles are never going to move as fast as like 12 pack cans. So I had to like take that into account, but still I was like, something needs to be done here. So really the past 6 months has been me like digging into how can we get more visibility to like better understand what's happening. Cause as you know, like retailers only give you typically, especially in fast moving categories like RTDs or hard seltzer or beer, they're giving you like one reset cycle, if that, to prove yourself. And when I found out that we had already been in like Kroger for a year and we hadn't been cut yet, I was like, "Oh, we're really like the time is ticking." So,
That's actually a topic, that we don't talk about a lot, but love to hear how do you think about reset cycles, and how does that impact where you focus and how you focus on certain stores?
yeah, every retailer is a little different, but the gist of it's all the same where you have like your fall and spring resets. And for a very seasonal brand like margaritas, luckily we have Bloody Marys, which do a little better in the colder months. But first and foremost, like if you have a seasonal brand, you're never wanting to go in. I've always worked for summer seasonal brands. So like I'm never wanting to go into the Pac Northwest in a fall reset. But I'll take like the Southwest in a fall reset. That's great. I'll take Fry's Arizona in a fall. But like really just making sure your seasonality lines up, I think is like the very first step in making sure you're gonna be successful in any set you go into.
That's smart. And so when you take on these resets, how much effort does it take or do you apply to succeeding in those stores in that first, let's call it 4 to 6 months? Is that the sweet spot or is it more of a slow burn for the company?
Oof. I mean, yeah, I would say from day 1 of that reset, like, you wanna be supporting with everything that you have, not discounting necessarily, but just, like, making sure you have like, you could be doing best com tags where you're, like, doing on-shelf advertising, you're doing, even if it's just, like, 50 cents off in the app, because not only is, like, this discounting supposed to help that rate of sale to the consumer, but, like, you're showing the buyer immediately that you're bought in and you care and you, like, are on top of it, because I think there's so many brands out there, especially smaller brands that, like, get into a set and then a year later, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to be doing XYZ." And it's like, well, it's too late. So I think like having that experience of like launching so many new retailers when I was at Spindrift spiked. And we did, like, we lost some and we didn't get them back because we weren't doing the right things from the start. I'm like making sure you are supporting from day one and like setting a cadence with that buyer and letting them know like you understand the weight of like this opportunity they're giving you.
And so obviously with Eileen and one of my experiences building my last company, when you have those big rollouts, one of our big issues a lot of times was just getting it on the shelf after it was shipped. Is that something you guys encounter much with Brutes or in your, I guess, past with Spindrift?
Yeah. So, yes, I mean, before any of that other stuff I just mentioned, like getting to the shelf is definitely step 1. And yeah, especially without a field sales team, like you could think that you're on the shelf. All the data says you're on the shelf. And then very recently, like we just got into week 9 Walmart sets, which was like mid March. And immediately our buyer starts asking, like, send me your USW, your unit sales per week starting like week 10. And it's like, well, and he's like, well, the data, like, data shows that you're there. Like, start showing me your USW. And it's like showing terrible because we think we're not 100% sure because we don't have a field sales team out there. We think that not every store is set. So we, did a test with Eileen and we go see that sure enough, there's nothing on the shelf despite all like the scintilla data saying that it's there. So it's a struggle, especially across different like distribution models.
For sure. And so like Scintilla's big data provider for Walmart and obviously provides a lot of information, but it doesn't actually tell you what's happening. And I think that's the funny or not, probably not funny. It's truth of what happens when you're building these brands and people assume that you go, I shipped it, but they might be available online. It might be in the warehouse, but it never hits the shelf until someone goes in and says, hey, in Walmart, it says you're here, you're not here. You know. And it's just such a crazy element of this industry that so many brands don't forecast. And I think it really impacts their ability to just even succeed at a minor level, let alone become a really massive brand.
For sure. Yeah, I know, like at Spindrift, we waited a very long time with our 8 packs to go into Walmart for multiple reasons. But luckily, by the time we got there, we were a big enough brand to pay for those services. I can't remember. I think it's maybe like Advantage or one of those like contracted field sales team that go in there. And I think it was like $1 million a week is what we were spending. And it's like the crazy thing is like those companies exist because like they know that the system's not good enough. And it's like instead of fixing the system, we just have these like retroactive solutions, which is sad.
Yeah, it's a killer for brand. And you're seeing it with Brutes, but it's a small team and every dollar matters. There's so many people in between typically waiting to suck up that margin. And at Walmart, you pick up Target, and then the merchandising companies come in and then the brokers come in and you look at it and you go, oh, I'm losing money. And I think that's the other big surprise is you must have to think in your head, when will I be profitable in this store? How many months of sales and what does my monthly sale have to be to actually just pay back for some of these programs? And it's a killer. It's a killer to see. I hate to see it when great brands end up looking at it as a cash suck instead of a profitable part of their business.
Yeah, definitely. Um, we saw that a lot with like Walmart. We were kind of like shotgun around, well, not fully around the country, like not a ton out west, but shotgun around like a lot of the east and central DCs when we rolled out with Walmart. And if we had like a DC that's only servicing one store through RJW, a consolidator, like we're literally losing money on this store. And it's especially in a category like mixers where we're never going to be doing like 100 units a week. It's just not sustainable. And I think that's really hard for like a lot of founders or smaller companies to realize because you're so excited when you get into a retailer, but you're not sure like exactly what goes into it. And then like on top of all that is just, okay, you get into the store and your margin's already eaten up and now you have to pay someone to go see if it's actually there. So
Yeah, and so that's actually probably a good topic for how you consider selling to stores. So you can't say yes to everybody, essentially. Do you have a litmus test or something you think about when it comes to which retailers you do or do not want to work with at this point as a brand that's still kind of growing and just expanding it as a small team?
yeah, yeah, we definitely do. I think at this point, like especially if we already have a state where we have like a sound DSD model, like sure, we'll take it on. But if we aren't in that state yet and it's not proven that this retailer is going to like make a huge difference for our brand, we're not like expanding states that don't make sense for us just to get like 100 new points of distribution. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that data, geographically where it is, freight costs, like all of that. And of course, like the consumer at that store itself, like Kroger even. I mean, Kroger has been amazing for us. It's a huge part of our business, but depending on like which Kroger banner it is, like even that differs for every state. So
Sure. Yeah, and each market could have a different behavior, and cocktail mixers are interesting, obviously because you're adjacent to the bev alc space, but you probably don't have to work through the traditional three-tier system. So do you work with the KE UNFIs, or do you still try to run through the Southern Wine and Spirits, breakthrough beverages of the world?
yeah, good question. And it's been a learning curve for me too. And I always forget that like we are non-alc technically because I keep thinking of us as like a cocktail. And I've always worked with alcohol for the most part. But yeah, like for the most part, we don't have exclusive contracts with DSD distributors. So there is the possibility to, like, for example, in Michigan, like we service Walmart direct through a consolidator. And then we also have a DSD Bev Alc distributor there. And it's difficult because they present their own issues and like they're better in some ways and vice versa. But at the end of the day, like there are issues with both for sure.
There is no perfect solution at this
There's
point.
really not.
Uh, and so we talked about the inventory and placement, and I know pricing has been a focus for you guys as well. How important is accurate pricing in your category, or at least hitting your price targets in these locations?
So important. Right now, especially because like a mixer again, like a bottle, we're never going to have a 200 case display like I did at White Claw. And like that was our big sales strategy when we're working with like 12 packs is just get it on the floor, visibility, people run into it with their shopping carts, they'll buy it. Like that's not how it's working with bottles. So really like your shelf presence needs to be flawless. And that comes down to like your branding, which we just did a huge rebrand, spent a ton of money with a great agency out of LA to be like, how do you literally stop people in their tracks? How do you make the consumer like have the least amount of thinking to realize what your product is and grab it off the shelf? And then the pricing is a huge part of that. And like what we've come to find is even premium mixers, like I'm not saying they shouldn't be above $9.99, but the consumer, when looking at the category and it's filled with a lot of like I won't name names, but plastic bottle mixers that are lime green and they're like $3.99. The consumer just isn't educated enough on the mixer category to understand why they should pay above like a single digit, like $9.99. So, and that's like we're struggling with that, especially a smaller brand. Like it's really hard for us to hit $9.99, but we're realizing like if we ever want to hit those economies of scale and be able to hit $9.99 and make margin, like we just kind of have to eat it for a second and like we really have to be $9.99. So that's a battle right now. And we could do everything. And this comes back to Eileen as well. And like store audits is like you suggest everything. We suggest that retailers and distributors sell for this price. And we work our margins backwards to make sure that everyone can get their cut. Cause we initially set our price to everyone. And we'll take huge cuts like on our margin to suggest what should happen. And then we get there and we see it in a place like, I don't know, Tennessee, where I don't live near that. Our founders don't live near that. And all of a sudden we're like 11.99. And it's like, where in this equation did this go wrong? So it's tough.
That's always painful when you think you're helping them by cutting price. So you go, "Hey, I'm going to give you this margin, so you hit 99.90," and they still take the $2 on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a the one I've seen it a bunch of times. And so you've had all these experiences growing brands and scaling, and you're just mentioned you're picking up Kroger out west, 800 doors or so, maybe more.
I think about 600. Yeah.
So in this process now, how do you approach that? Like, what are you thinking about are your priorities that maybe weren't the priorities when you were scaling through the first wave of Walmart?
Yeah. Priorities now. So we are going with KeHE out west, which actually is our first time going through anyone other than like a consolidator or a DSD bug out distributor. So like we were definitely nervous at first. Like we heard a lot of stories from people like KeHE will just eat all your margin. They're going to bill you back for everything. And we don't know yet. Like we haven't fully gotten there. It's like happening right now. But at the end of the day, like what's working for us in Walmart is that there is a system that orders our product when inventory gets low, and it's not foolproof like whatsoever, but product is getting to the shelf. And there's that human error involved with DSD distributors where a rep like literally might forget that we're in their portfolio. And like I can't go do a GSM every week at these distributors all across the country and remind them that Brutes exist. So like having these automated systems where orders get placed, we're at the point where like that's probably the most important thing for us. And if I can control on the back end, like in our digital deals, getting the price right, and then KeHE simply just like filling the shelf, like that's where I think we're gonna see success right now.
Good. And so in the category, out of curiosity, what is the usual turn rate or maybe even buying occasion? So, I mean, RTD, more impulse or repeat purchases. Mixers seems like it could be either an occasion-based buy, "I wanna have a Bloody Mary," there it is, or is it sort of a repeat with a slower return rate?
I do think there's definitely repeat buyers, people that, like, love the brand, but for the most part, it's occasion based, and we're trying to change that. Like, people aren't just drinking RTDs on occasion, like, they're drinking them as if they would drink a beer, but people feel, like, very, like, scared almost, like they don't deserve a mixer, like it's, like, too nice or something, or when I'm doing demos, people are like, "Oh, this would be great for someone's birthday present. This would be great for Christmas. This would be," and I'm like, "It'd be great for a Thursday night too." Like, you can drink it whenever. So we're trying to change that right now.
I'm on maybe I'm one of the few. I drink Bloody Mary mix as a drink, just light it. It's just like it tastes good. I'm a fan of Bloody Mary mix. On the plane, I'm like the 80-year-old man that orders the Bloody Mary mix with the flight. So I really enjoyed this. And one question I always like to ask is kind of more for future founders or people in the space or people that are kind of building brands. If someone came to you tomorrow and just said, "Hey, I just picked up 600 stores. I'm going into Kroger. I'm going into Target." What would you recommend they prioritize in the first, let's call it 30 to 60 days? So like if we're coming to you, you're taking over sales. What are the priorities for you when it comes to those rollouts?
Yeah, first and foremost, get your distribution model ironed out. Really think about, do you want to go DSD? Do you need to go DSD? Like what makes the most sense? And if you don't know, like I would highly recommend getting maybe a consultant who is an expert in distribution because that is way more than half of the story, I would say, when gaining a retailer. So yeah, starting with distribution and then second, your price. Like your price is so important. Don't like deep discount or anything like that out of the gates. Like build your brand with with intention, but there is so much that can happen like between all of the retailer systems, like the share points and this and that. And like if you like have blind spots to what's happening between like the commitment and what's happening on the shelf, that might surprise you in a bad way. So like staying super close to whether it's your buyer or if you have like a key account manager who's an expert in that chain, like you just don't want any negative surprises between the commitment and like showing up on the shelf.
So that's a great point. It's a great point. And we've probably all learned it the hard way. So I think that's a really good point. Well, Courtney, I really appreciate you joining me. I really love to hear your background and your story as well as what you're doing at Brutes. And I think the cocktail mixer category is due for a brand that really takes it seriously. And I think Brewt's has that DNA. I'm excited to see you continue growing. I appreciate all the information. I'm sure everyone listening really gets a lot of value out of hearing what it's like to go through this growth process. So that's a wrap for us today. If anything we talked about sounds familiar, flat velocity, a broker telling you everything looks fine, a shelf you haven't seen in weeks. Come visit us at Eileen, and we'll get a first audit in the books for you for free. And we'll give you some insights and hopefully make your world a little less painful. Thank you, and come back again for Know Thy Shelf.